the nickname Yaz a lot?
Yeah, Yaz. Yeah. People will call me,
Yaz.
like all my friends will call me Yaz. Yeah. Do you guys call me Yaz sometimes? Yeah, the team calls me Yaz. Yeah, a lot of people call me Yaz. Yeah, I used to be called Yasmataz when I was younger, but
Yes,
yeah,
Mataz, I love that. Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard you called in the field when some of the anchors or reporters will toss to you. They've said yes, yes, and I was
yeah.
wondering if that's
A lot of people. Exactly, you're right. It's funny because a lot of people on TV will call me Yaz, and in the podcast everywhere. Yeah, they call me Yaz. Yes,
it
it's
makes me
funny.
think about this. You have such a cool, unique name, but did you ever feel the pressure to change it for on air because people won't know how to pronounce it, people won't know how to spell it?
Yes, I mean, from the beginning. One, because I mean, to be in all honesty, I think I was worried about um, the origin of my name, and like worried that I would not necessarily get jobs because I'm Middle Eastern, and worried that, like, having a unique name like that was gonna kind of like put me out of the running for certain jobs, especially in a time in which you felt like, people were not as accepting as they are now. And so that was something that I worried about, the length of my name, I mean, people have pronounced my name in so many different weird ways. It is unbelievable. And I've had to keep a straight face when they toss to me. I also will not name names, but at one point there was an individual, an executive in my life who told me I shouldn't use my last name in the announcing of the show and just go with my first name. And I'm like, but I'm not Cher. I'm not Beyonce. Like, how is that going to work? So yes, it has always been a consideration. I'm on my second marriage and hopefully last. But I took my first husband's name when I got married the first time, and then I changed it back after I got divorced. But I thought for a hot second about keeping it so I wouldn't have like such a complicated last name. But I decided not to, and changed it back. And in my second marriage now, I have not changed my name. I have kept it.
That's so interesting you say
and
that.
And now I embrace it, by the way. Now I'm like, yes, Yasmin Vossoughian. Here we go. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. When I was at my first market, I had a different last name, and then I got engaged. And so when I went to my second market, the news director said, "Are you sure this marriage is, are you sure you're going to get married? Are you sure?" Because I wanted to change it to my husband's last name. I'm like, yes, we've been together already. I think at that point it had been 9 years. So I was like, I think we're good. Like,
and has it lasted? Are you still together?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
You're like, but we just broke up, so now it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, we just got divorced, so now I'm trying to figure that. No. But that makes a great point. So where did you grow up? And tell me about your heritage.
So I grew up in a town called Cornwall-on-Hudson, which is in the Hudson Valley, in upstate New York, about an hour north of New York City. So not upstate, it's downstate, an hour north of New York City. It's this super small town. I don't know what the population is, but it's like a suburb of New York. And it was like an idyllic place to grow up, honestly. But my parents are Iranian, and I'm Iranian American. So I was born in the U.S., in Newark, New York. And I kind of, was raised as this like brown girl with this smelly house with weird food and parents with weird accents in a town that did not necessarily have a lot of diversity. And so I was like always wanting to blend in more than anything else. I wanted to like be a part of the crowd, be normal, instead of having this like unique name and where I was from and weird foods and weird snacks. Like I was the kid that showed up to class or school lunches with like a weird lunch, like I just wanted Doritos and High C, and a pepperoni sandwich. And that was never in my lunch. And so that was like, that was a big part of my upbringing. And one of the reasons why I became a journalist really was because of the fact that I felt like I wanted to help give a voice to people that felt voiceless, like people that felt kind of like the odd man out, because I always felt like the odd man out. Like I was always a kid that was, I guess, pretty popular. I had a lot of friends. I was always outgoing. I was always super involved in sports. But I was never really authentically myself because I felt kind of ashamed to be who I really was, being, an Iranian American. And then I also have this big purple birthmark on my left leg, which made me like extra unique and extra different. So like those things coupled together, I think, was what made me kind of want to go down the journalism route, is because I felt like, if I felt like I didn't have a voice, there's got to be a lot of other people out there that don't have a voice, but yet I could be kind of the bridge because I have found a unique way to communicate with people that I felt like other people didn't necessarily have.
Do you have children?
I have 2 kids. Yeah, I have 2 boys, a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old is turning 9 next week.
Does it break your heart thinking about little you, and now that you have your own children, the things that you experienced as a kid, feeling not accepted or feeling like you don't fit in?
Oh my God, all the time, because I sometimes, I'm like one of those cliches that project my own insecurities onto my kids, and I try not to, but I think it's hard, obviously, as a mom. Are you a mom?
Yes, I am. I have a 3-year-old. And so you just explaining that almost makes me tear up because, you never want your kid to go through that, right?
Yeah. And every time, my kids are both very communicative and they tell us a lot of what goes on at school. And my older one, like he would come home sometimes, he'll come home sometimes and talk about maybe if he's being bullied about something or someone has said something mean to him. Or my younger one the other day said like someone called him an idiot, for instance. And I'm like, well, how did that make you feel? He's like, not good. And I'm like, well, buddy, it doesn't matter what people say to you. Like, I get that that doesn't make you feel good because it does stink to be called names like that. But like what those people say to you doesn't define who you are. And not only am I saying that to them, I'm saying that to myself, because I think I felt it then. And I think we always have a semblance of that now, right? Like I was doing another interview the other day and someone asked if I still had imposter syndrome. And I'm like, I will have imposter syndrome to the day I die. Like it doesn't matter what I achieve. It doesn't matter how many Emmys I get, how many things I do, how many shows I anchor, how many times people say I did a good job. Like it does not matter. I will have it forever. And so, oftentimes the thing I would tell the little girl then and the things I tell my sons now, I'm also still telling my grown-up self.
Yeah, exactly. So you said that you knew you wanted to be a journalist from a fairly young age, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So I saw Diane Sawyer on 60 Minutes when I was a young kid. And I remember seeing her first broadcast. And my dad was a huge 60 Minutes fan. So like the world would stop at 7 p.m. every Sunday to watch 60 Minutes. I mean, literally we were driving. He would turn it on the radio. Whatever was happening in our house, we would have to stop and watch. And I always loved having that time with my dad. But I was always finding ways to interview people. So my brother and sister and I, we would always put on shows. So I would interview, for instance, like Ozzy Osbourne. It would be my brother dressed up in a wig. And I'd be like, up next, Mike. I mean, I had great bookers, by the way. Like, I'd be like, up next, Michael Jackson. I mean, I was getting A-list stars on my show at a very young age.
I need you to be my booker, please.
Exactly. And we actually still have all of this on video. And then I would do the weather, actually. So I would go in front of this TV and we would put it on the black and white fizzy, the fizzy, whatever it was called. Yeah. And I'd be like, a cold front is coming or snow has fallen, And so I would do the weather and then I would do the news and I would have these big dangly earrings on and my best dress. And then I would interview Ozzy and then Michael Jackson. And then we would wrap the show. And I did that from a very young age. And so I always found ways, even during my schooling, whether it's in high school or college, ways in which I could actually tell the story through a video medium. So I remember this one time in college, I was an econ major, a double major of econ and history, and I was asked to write a 40-page paper for macroeconomics about the difference in comparing the difference in salaries and what people do. So basically how it's not equitable, right? Like a CEO who sits up in a company all day and in a clean office and, gets paid $500,000 and a guy who's in the sewers is getting paid $50,000 a year and, what they're doing compared to what they actually get paid. And so instead of writing a paper on, the equity of salaries, I was like, can I do a piece on it, a story on it? So I went into the sewers, the LA sewer system with sewage workers, climbed into the manholes and spent a day in the life with a sewage worker. And then I went and spent a day in the life with a CEO. Wow. And my econ professor at the time actually was like, yeah, do it, go ahead. And I remember showing this to the whole class, everybody else was handing in their papers and I showed my piece. And this one guy was a guy who actually had a crush on at the time, was like, oh my God, you're the next Barbara Walters. And it really shook me, and I've taken it with me, for the rest of my life. So yes, long story short, I've always wanted to be a journalist.
What did that piece, I'm so curious, teach you?
It taught me that you have to get on the ground with people. Like people always say like, oh, do you like anchoring better? Do you like reporting better in the field? What do you like? And I'm like, I mean, I love anchoring because it's great for my life. I love podcasting because it's great for my life. I have kids. I'm older now. I don't want to be on the road as much. But like, I spent a lot of time overseas as a foreign correspondent, and I still go out in the field a lot and, covering major news stories, whether it was like Uvalde or January 6th. Yeah. And there is something about being with, like, telling the story from where the story is, and it makes you such a better anchor, such a better journalist. It makes you more attuned to what is actually happening in the world and why it's happening. It makes, people will say to me, like, how do you do this type of story if you don't agree with what they're doing? And I'm like, well, because first of all, it's not about how I feel about the story, but also because I can empathize with what's happening in their life. And I think like that's what a lot of people lack right now in a country that feels very divided, is that we can't necessarily empathize with one another and understand why we think the way that we do. And I think that I have like, we as journalists have the great privilege of being able to understand how other people live. And that's why that's what I learned from telling that story, is understanding what the sewage worker does every day, climbing into that manhole for that city to remain, cracking, to remain going.
Yeah, we as journalists have to get out of our little bubble and explore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we'll get to all of the stories that you've covered in the field and internationally. But first, where did you go in your career? What was your first step?
What was oh my gosh. So like my first professional step?
Yes.
So, I guess my very first step was when I graduated college, I worked for the Howard Stern Show. So I was doing internships all throughout.
Did you get a degree in broadcast journalism?
No, I went to I went to a liberal arts school. So in Los Angeles, Occidental College, with 1,600 kids. So they didn't even have broadcast journalism as a major. I was a history economics major, and I minored in theater.
I minored in theater too.
Oh, you did?
I did, yeah.
I did this one exercise I was telling my kids about the other day, where we had to act like we were in a zoo and like we were zoo animals, and then people would have to come buy tickets and like watch us be in the zoo. So like all day I had to like be, I don't remember, I was a bear or a lion or something. And all day I was just like a bear or a lion in a cage. It's part of my theater. Anyways.
Fun.
Yeah, exactly. I also sang like Marvin Gaye, "Let's Get It On" as a performer. Anyway, it was
Go ahead.
But when I got out of college, I had done internships all throughout college. I was like, I had, instead of going abroad my junior year, I actually went and worked for MTV News as an intern. And then when I got out of college, I also worked for a congressman at one point in Washington. And so when I got out of college, I thought I got a job at Entertainment TV, because I thought I wanted to go into entertainment television and entertainment news back in New York, because I was in LA at the time for school. And by getting a job for E, I started working for the Howard Stern Show as a production assistant for the E show, the Howard Stern Show on E, which obviously is no longer. And then they launched the Style Network as well, which was like a fashion network, if you remember. And so, so I was like, it was amazing because I got to like work with Howard Stern, and then I would like go behind the scenes backstage for all these like major fashion shows at New York Fashion Week. And it was such an incredible experience for me as a production assistant. And I would work with all of this like different E-News talent, and then I would befriend all of the cameramen. And then when we were like out on a shoot, I'd be like, hey, can I do a stand-up? Hey, can I like pretend to talk to camera so I can have it for my reel? So I started
to.
Exactly. So I started doing stuff like that. And 9/11 happened. We were in the midst of Fashion Week, I remember, and I thought to myself, and the big question at the time was like, does Fashion Week go on? And I thought, that's the question right now. Like, that's what we're dealing with. And I was in New York City when 9/11 happened. And so I thought, I think I need to transition and go into news. Like, I need to get into hard news. Like, I have an access to the part of the world that, is a part of this story, right? To the Middle East. I speak the language, and I think I need to kind of leave entertainment behind as much as I love it, and get more into the hard news of it all because of the access I have to a certain people. Like, this is why I'm doing this, right? To get voice to the voiceless and to help build the bridge. And so I basically took my camera in 2005 overseas that I got for my college graduation, and went to Iran and basically lived there. And
Wow.
I did a piece that we titled Fast Times at Tehran High, and I submitted it to a network called Current TV, which was launched by Al Gore. And that put me on the map. They launched the network in '05 with my piece. Like at midnight, Current TV started, and my piece rolled, Fast Times at Tehran High. And Al Gore took it on The Tonight Show to promote Current TV, and he talked about and showed a portion of my piece, which was a surreal moment for like a 22-year-old.
Seriously,
Yeah.
what was going through your mind when
And
you saw that?
literally, I shot it on a Handycam. Like I shot it on a flip, like a hand, like those old school.
Yeah.
And my lighting at times during this piece was like a candle or like a flashlight because we would like shoot things in the dark. Like it was so basic. I
Yeah.
edited it on Final Cut Pro for Dummies with Final Cut Pro for Dummies on my lap because I didn't know how to use Final Cut. And so, I mean, it was totally surreal. It was crazy. But like, again, I was in my early 20s. Like I didn't even understand. I didn't get it. You know, I didn't get how, as most people in their early 20s don't, like I see people in the hallways now, you know, the access that people have at this age
Yes.
to network television that I would have killed to have early on in my career. And I'm like, you are super lucky to be
Yeah.
doing this at such a young age because you just don't get it at that. Like you don't understand how cool it is to do big things like that at that early age because you're like, what's next? What's next? What's next? You know?
I think it also shows that you use the resources you have, make something happen with whatever
Exactly.
you have.
Well, you have to. In this industry, if you don't make, you know, you can talk about it all you want, but you got to make it happen because otherwise you'll be left behind. Yeah.
Yep.
Every day.
You also said, yeah, seriously. You also said that you were at Style Network and then 9/11 happened. In my mind, the Style Network would probably have been right in the center of town, right? Like, do you remember 9/11? Where were you at on that day?
So I was at the gym. I just laugh because I'm always like, it's always like funny that I'm like, I was at the gym
I was just interviewing somebody about 9/11 and he's a former reporter in DC and he was at the gym when it happened.
So yeah, I mean, our days start early. I mean,
Yeah.
I went on a run this morning at 5:30 in the morning. So I was at the gym and it was going to be like another long, brutal day. And because I was working for the Style Network at the time, it was the middle of Fashion Week. And I was, you know, a young intern and I was on the treadmill and I remember I was on 18th Street. It was a gym on 18th Street and Broadway, which is like just, you know, about a mile up from the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
And my sister actually lives about 8 blocks from the Twin Towers. And I was on the treadmill and I remember looking up the TV and seeing the first plane crash into the Twin Towers and thinking, oh my gosh, what is happening? And I kept running. And then when we saw the second plane crash in, I got off the treadmill and I remember everybody kind of like gathering around the TVs to see what was happening. And it was like shocking. And then of course a lot of us had lost cell service at this point. So like you couldn't communicate with people. And so I remember running downstairs to grab my stuff and I ran out into the streets. And at that point we started to see people stream up Broadway, just covered in soot. So at this point, the buildings had collapsed and started people streaming up Broadway. And I lived about 4 blocks away from where I was at the time, and I was supposed to be at work probably in like, you know, an hour or so. And I couldn't get in contact with anybody except for a really good friend of mine who worked at a publishing house. Her phone was still working, so I could somehow call her and she could like connect to my friends and family. And so at that point, I had learned, I think, that, you know, I didn't have to be at work and like we just needed to be in a safe place. And
Yeah.
my parents lived in the home that I grew up in about an hour north of New York City. So somehow I'd gotten in touch with my sister, her husband, and my sister had a 1-year-old at the time. And they decided to rollerblade up the West Side Highway to the Upper West Side. And I put my rollerblades on. Went home, got my rollerblades, and I rollerbladed up to, I think, 150th Street or something like that. And we met my brother and sister and I all met up there. And then we got into a car and we drove out of the city. But at that point, it was nighttime. But we were out of the city for a few days and then finally came back. I remember when coming back into the city, it was like you could just smell, you know, the smell. I still remember it to this day. It was like burning rubber that you could smell in the city for weeks and weeks after that. And you couldn't go below 14th Street unless you had an ID, and I lived below 14th Street. So I'd have to go every day, and my sister wasn't able to return home for a while. because she lived so close to the site. So
Yeah.
yeah,
In New York.
it was a real moment in my life, obviously, and in many of our lives as Americans
Yeah,
and
for
people
sure.
around the world. Yeah.
So you were at Current TV. So where did you go after that?
Um, gosh, it's hard to remember. So after Current, I went to where did I go after? After Current, I went to Gallup. So you know the Gallup polls.
Yes. Hmm.
So they decided they were going to launch something called the Gallup World Poll, which was basically like polling around the world about like people's satisfaction with their government, with their country, like getting a job, that kind of thing. And they wanted me to turn it into a story. So I actually ended up working for them down in Washington for a few years. And I would basically travel the world turning these numbers into stories. So for instance, that was my first trip that I made to Israel as a foreign correspondent, where I went into the West Bank, I went into Gaza, and I would talk to people about their satisfaction, for instance, in starting a business. And then I would turn that into a 5-minute, 6-minute piece. I was in Africa talking about people's like access to medicine. And then I would turn that into a 5 or 6-minute piece. Then we would do like live hits on polling and stuff on CNBC for Gallup poll. And so that was like, I was there in Washington, and I really kind of was able to sink my teeth into not only the foreign news that I'd been doing at Current, but also get more live television experience, like teleprompter reading experience, that kind of thing. Because at Current, it was more guerrilla style journalism. Like we were taking a camera and we were just like running and gunning. Whereas once I got to Gallup, it was like, more kind of getting into the anchor mode along with the packages, writing the packages and shooting the packages and the storytelling and traveling the world for them.
More polished.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you were at Gallup and you were doing all of this foreign correspondent work, is there any time when you felt nervous for your safety as an international correspondent?
I mean, I think you always have, especially from like Current on, I spent a lot of time overseas from Current on, in my work. And I think, it's an interesting question because it's, I was in Israel a few months ago for NBC, and you're able to compartmentalize when you're there. And so, whether it's naive or not, I don't necessarily ever feel like I'm in danger or worried. I think now more I worry about like my kids, and I miss my kids, and I want to be back home with my kids, but I never necessarily feel unsafe. And that might be why I make those choices to do what I do. Like maybe that's just how my brain works,
Yeah, right.
And for some people they wouldn't choose to do what I do, or wouldn't have chosen to do what I had done. But I always kind of felt a little bit like I was, just out there doing the job that I needed to do, and I was going to be fine, and I was going to make it home to tell the story. I mean, certainly I made smart choices to make sure I wasn't put into precarious positions, and there were definitely some hairy ones. But at the end of the day, I was very much focused on my work. And when you're focused on what you're doing, the stories that you're telling, oftentimes you forget about the possible, danger you could feasibly be in.
So you were at Gallup, and then what took you to MSNBC?
Well, it was a long, windy road. I was freelancing for CNN. I was at New York One for some time as well, because I realized I needed to get some like real newsroom experience here in New York. I was at a reporter down in South Carolina for a while. Then I went back to CNN and CNN headline news, and then I was an anchor there for many years. And then MSNBC came calling in 2016. I was pregnant with my first son, and I was at CNN Headline News at the time. And MSNBC offered me a job, and I wanted to come back to New York because that is where my family was. And I had gotten divorced 2 years prior, and I had met my then boyfriend and baby daddy because we got pregnant before we got married. And we decided, I got this offer from MSNBC and from NBC News. And I said, it's a great opportunity for me to move back to New York. And so I took it. And so that's how I landed back here.
And is that when you ended up starting on Morning Joe?
Yeah, so that was essentially my first job here was I anchored Morning Joe First Look, which was the 5 a.m. show leading up to Morning Joe. And I was on that show until September of 2020, so into the pandemic. And we were getting up I was up at 2 a.m. every morning. I had a newborn and had another child during that time period as well. So I had 2 babies under the age of 3 anchoring a 5 a.m. show. And that was the time when it was super intense, not unlike now. That was during Trump's first presidency. And we were working all day. I would do the 5 a.m. show, and then I would be on Morning Joe, and then I would anchor, maybe fill in on an 11 a.m. show, then maybe pick up a 6 p.m. fill in for Ari on a 6 p.m. show. So I was running home to kiss my kids in the middle of the day. I had a Sunday show, so I was working 6 days a week. It was 24/7. But I was new, and I said yes to everything, and I wanted to say yes to everything. It was a really, big time in our country, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah, and you obviously have to say yes to everything when you're first starting out at a new position that you're offered.
Yeah, I still suffer from the yes, though. I still suffer from that.
You do.
Yeah. Like today, I'm it's one of the reasons you and I are supposed to talk later on in the day, but they're like, can you anchor tonight? And so I'm doing the podcast today, but then I have to anchor tonight at 5 p.m. And then I had to do another story for another show. And so it's
maybe that's the journalist in us suffering from the yes.
Yeah, it's the journalist. It's the womanness. I think it's a, imposter syndrome thing. It's all of those beautiful things combined.
So you were offered jobs at CNN, then you go to MSNBC. All of these pinnacle moments in your career, what was the point at which you thought, oh my gosh, I really made it?
Have I? Have I made it?
I would say you have, but
Never.
Never. Wow.
Yeah, no, never. I'll never say that. Once you say that, then it's over. It's I feel like it's like the curse of winning the Oscar.
Oh.
No, never. I've never made it. Never. Because it's then what? It's I'm always someone said to me once, I feel like you're the kind of person that's never satisfied. I'm like, yeah, and?
Yeah.
That's why we get to where we go, right? That's why we achieve. It's ambition. You never really make it, right?
I feel like I'm the same way too, though. But sometimes do you look back, when you were offered the job at CNN or when you were offered the job at MSNBC, did you have any time to sit back and be like,
no,
wow, that's a big accomplishment? No,
maybe that's my problem, but that's for therapy, I guess. But no, listen, the honest truth is and that is the honest truth, but I think it's also, I'm different now than I recognize now the value that I bring to the table. I recognize now the value that I have and the things that I can achieve and that I'll be okay with or without this job or the next job or the last job. I'm going to be fine. And that I've worked really hard to get to where I am in life, but I don't take any of it for granted. And I never necessarily feel like I made it. And I think that's part of this industry. It's part of the job, which is the honest to God truth. I think there's a part of this industry that never really wants you to feel like you made it either,
Yeah, that is true.
And, it's the nature of the beast, but we do it anyway. And so you just keep going and see what's next. That's what kind of with the podcast too. It's another pivot, I think, for me that I'm really, really enjoying with Here's the Scoop is it's another pivot of let me figure out this skill of podcasting. Oh my gosh, I love it. It's so great. I get to sit down with people and have really in-depth conversations and speak super organically and naturally and be myself and not necessarily have to be in full hair and makeup and be anchor Yasmin, but get to just be Yasmin and get that from other people, which I just love. And I find that people enjoy being on the podcast, talking and speaking in that way. And it just feels so much more intimate, And so there's always more to learn and more to conquer and more to figure out.
Yeah, that's a good segue. So at MSNBC, how did NBC News happen?
So last year, let's see. So I was doing Morning Joe First Look. Then after Morning Joe First Look, I had a weekend show at MSNBC for many years. And then that show went away, I guess, 2 years ago. And I was like a national correspondent and filling in all over the place. And then NBC decided to bring me over. So it was before the split between NBC and MSNBC. NBC was like, hey, we'd like to bring you over to NBC. And so I said, okay, let's do it. And so I came over to NBC. And then within NBC, I've found some incredible leaders here who have really supported me. And I guess I think for folks that ask like my advice, I'm like, find people that support you. Like find people that are your champions, right? Because you can have as much talent. You can be the best at your job. But if you don't have people that are supporting you and believe in you, then like you'll get nowhere. It doesn't matter how good you are, you know? And it doesn't mean you shouldn't work hard. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be great. But you also need to like curate those relationships. And that's taken me some time to figure out. And I've created really good relationships here. And there have been people here that have really supported me and saw like the unique talent that I bring to the table as Yasmin and like have supported me in that journey. And we're like, we want to bring you over to NBC and then it was like, and we want to give you, we want you to get into this podcast. We think you'd be really good at it. And so that's kind of how that transition has been made. And so I do stuff for Today Show, Nightly News for, filling in for, on our streaming network, anchoring, and then now hosting this podcast, which has just been a real, a really incredible, learning curve and experience.
Yeah, I always recommend to people, find a job where you like the people you work with and the team you work with, because it is so much easier to work in a job, even if the job isn't exactly what you want. But if you like the people you work with, you can sustain so much longer than the vice versa of a job maybe you love and the people aren't that great.
I heard this advice the other day, which was someone was like, how do you decide if you should take a job, if you should do something? And it's like, ask yourself if you like your boss. Like ask yourself if the job that you take will be working for someone who supports you. Ask yourself if the job that you take will be with someone that you respect, that you want to work for, that you want to work on behalf of, for an organization that you are proud of. And if the answer is no, then don't take the job, even if you feel like it might be the right job for you or you deserve the job. Because you could, again, spin your wheels in that job and be great at it. But if you're not working with people that you support or for an organization that you admire or, people that support you, it's just not going to go anywhere, right? So
1,000%.
Yeah, you got it. It's about the relationships, the people that you're working with, besides and for.
Can we talk about some of the stories that you've covered? You did cover the January 6th riots at the Capitol. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I was sent down to Washington, D.C. On January 5th to cover that moment in Congress, to the certification of the election. And we had internal intelligence suggesting that there might be some protests and that kind of thing, but certainly nothing to suggest what actually happened. I remember waking up on January 6th. It was a really cold day, getting dressed for the day, layering up to make sure I was prepared, knowing I was going to be out all day. We made our way down to the Ellipse, which is where then President Trump in his first term was going to be making his speech on that certification day and hearing the speech. And the crowd it was a big crowd. And I remember feeling as if people were really angry, but I certainly didn't expect to see what actually took place. And as we were walking up Constitution Avenue, I spoke to a lot of different folks with the camera, and we were we were all over the place. And people were just, they had this belief that then Vice President Mike Pence could choose to not certify the election. And as much as, we went back and forth on the fact that the Constitution says otherwise, people felt very convicted, right? They felt like they were there for a reason. They felt like they'd been wrong, that the election had been stolen from them. And I remember, making our way to the steps of the Capitol and being on that front lawn in front of the Capitol. I think we were on the south side of the Capitol, if I remember correctly. And it was, again, a really cold day. We'd been out all day, and my crew and I were like, okay, the crowd seems to be gathering and they're protesting, but maybe we should take a break. We all have to pee. We're tired. We want to get something to eat. Let's go into like a Panera real quick, and then we'll come back. And the second we said that, we looked up and we started seeing people hanging from the rafters. Because if you remember, it was a few weeks before the inauguration of then President-elect Joe Biden. And we were like, what is happening? And then we started to see the footage from inside the Capitol, and we saw people making their way into the doors. And that's when it was like, so we grabbed the crew, and we just ran for the steps. We were on the lawn, so we ran towards the Capitol. And obviously, like, I think I had 2 security with me at that point. And we were on the steps of the Capitol, and we were just seeing like the smoke bombs, the tear gas, all of it, people coming out of the Capitol, putting milk on their eyes because they'd been hit with tear gas. And I was just talking to all of them. I mean, I was just talking to all of them, getting a sense of what was happening, why they were there, what they wanted to see. It was a surreal moment. I mean, again, I've been in war zones. I've been overseas. I've been, I've seen a lot. And it was a surreal moment to feel as if, my life was in danger. Like the story that we were telling was happening here in the United States and not somewhere else. Like that was, I think that what was most poignant to me in that moment was like, this isn't happening in a third world country. This is happening in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And people couldn't get in contact with me, my friends, my family. The cell signals were all mixed. We weren't getting a lot of service. But we were there till midnight. I mean, it was all day. And I remember the barricades were put up. And then at one point when, President Trump said, like, and I'm paraphrasing here, I love you, but go home. That was around, I think, 4 or 5 p.m. at that point, finally, that the announcement came through. And it's like, it was as if the crowd just dissipated. It was like they just receded. It was as if you had watched a flood and then the water just started to recede. And that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. And then the National Guard came in and the barricades were put up. But yeah, I mean, it was a real moment, I think.
I worked that day, and I remember being in a 10, 12-hour Zoom call with my team that day, just watching it all unfold. But watching it all unfold on TV versus you watching it unfold in real time, in person, right there. Did that feel like, I can't believe I'm standing here witnessing it? Because it's something to see something on TV, but then to actually being there, experiencing it.
Yeah, I mean, it was surreal. But I think it goes back to the question that you asked earlier, which is you're just thinking about the story, right? I'm like, what's my next life hit? Okay, Chuck Todd. Okay, Nicole Wallet. Okay, who am I talking to? Yeah. What are we talking about? What are you seeing? What's being reported? What am I seeing visually? Are we safe? Should we go in? Should we stay out? What are they telling us? That you don't really have a moment to reflect until maybe the next day when the emails start coming in and the text, are you okay? I was watching, and you
start digesting it all too.
Exactly. And you have some removal. And the next day was like this bright, sunny, warmer day. And that's when I really got to kind of digest, like, okay, that happened.
Yeah, you said that you were talking with some of the people out there as well that were protesting, right?
Yes. Yeah, we talked to a lot of people on the ground there. There was people that came from all over the country. And, again, they felt, and that was also the amazing thing is like, it was parents, kids, people of all ages, angry, feeling as if they'd been wronged, feeling as if the election had been stolen from them. And, I think oftentimes people are like, were you worried for your own safety? I mean, reporters are being attacked. Journalists were being attacked on that day. Their cameras were smashed. Happened to our crew, not the crew that was with me, but a separate crew with another correspondent. And so you're very aware of the way in which you talk to people, right? You don't use your hands, very kind of, open to listening, making sure that they don't feel as if you're a threat to them. Mm-hmm. And, that's how you get people to open up even on kind of one of the more emotional days and, politically charged days that we had seen in our nation's history.
And were you doing live shots on that day as well?
Nonstop, beyond. Yeah.
Did you find that difficult because, or
No.
were you?
Yeah, that's what I was there for. I would have been pissed if I wasn't doing live shots all day. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm like, you guys got to see this,
Yeah.
like you wanted the nation to see what was happening, right? And everybody wanted to see. So no, I mean, it was, yeah,
When you
that's
were
the only,
doing those
yeah.
live shots, how close up to the action were you?
We were on the steps. We were there. We were in the middle of it. We would have gone in, but our security didn't want us to go in. Like 30 Rock security, not the security on the ground with us, like NBC security.
How do you focus in a time like that? Because obviously you have a lot of angry people that are behind you, around you. Like, how do you maintain focus during a live shot?
It's you address it, right? Like, I think one of the ways, it's like, I think the ways that I go about those types of live shots is explaining what's happening around me. And that's what keeps me focused, right? So not only do I get to explain what happens around me, I get to keep my eyes and ears on what's happening around me by explaining it, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So like, here's what you're seeing, this guy over here, this is what's happening behind me, right? Like, I get to kind of keep my eyes and ears on everything. And that helps me focus on like my surroundings, but then also speak to camera. And again, it's like, it's on adrenaline. Sometimes the way I see it is like I black out. Like I have these moments where I black out. Like and then I like wake up and I'm like, oh, I just did 100 live shots and made sense the entire time, Like it's like you come out of it.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, can we get a glass of wine? Because this is really a lot. But yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you have any tips for aspiring journalists or journalists working in the field doing live shots, because you've done a million of them at this point?
So it's such a cliche, but like I am a big believer in being yourself. Like, don't try and be the person you think should be on TV, right? Like don't try and be who you think you should sound like on TV or look like on TV. Be you. Right? Bring your unique capabilities and your unique perspective to the table. And I think what is different about today versus 20, 30, 40 years ago is that we can be ourselves on television. Like, people are now open and welcoming that. Like, we don't need to be blank slates anymore. Like that is like the journalism of our parents' generation. I think we can now bring like our, not perspective, but our unique selves to the table, right? Like, we can be authentically who we are, even in those moments. And then I think the other advice I would give is like, be an active listener. You have to listen, right? Like, listen to what the person is asking you. Don't just go with like your canned response, right? Okay, I already have it rehearsed in my head. I'm going to do 2 minutes. I'm going to touch on this, this, this. But then, for instance, Stephanie asked me like, what is the weather like? I'm like, and then I just go on this rant about something else because it's already rehearsed, Respond.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's hot out here, Steph. And let me tell you, it's looking like it's going to be 90 degrees, whatever,
Yeah.
Respond, like have a conversation and actively listen to the person that's asking the question and the people that you're interviewing, right? Make it dynamic. Like, tell us what's happening, because you are the eyes and ears of the audience.
Also, when interviewing high public officials, you've interviewed President Biden.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you're preparing for an interview like that, what's your process?
Read and watch as much as you can, and then put it all aside and just do it. Like, prepare, and then do it and be prepared to throw it all out the window.
Yeah, I've said this on the podcast before, but a theater director once told me, learn all your lines so you can forget them.
Yeah.
And that's
exactly
what sticks with me. Do the prep, and then
listen. Like, if the president says something that you're like, wait a minute, what? I wasn't going to go in that direction, but what did you? Let me stop you there. Hold on.
Yes.
You have to listen, and I think that's the biggest issue that we have. Oftentimes, you have to be prepared, and you got to listen. You got to be prepared for where they might go, and then be confident that it's in your brain. You shoved it in there, and then put it all aside and be ready to throw it out.
Speaking of which, what was it like?
Also, always know your first question.
Oh, go on. What do you mean by that?
So, because your first question is like, that's the launch. That's a launching pad, right? That's like, it gets your nerves out of the way. You got your first question, right? Get it out of the way. Get your first question. No, where are you going to go with it? That's the launch. And then everything else is like easy, right?
Yeah.
You get it, and then listen. So get your first question out, and then just listen, and then you'll know where you're going to go.
Do you believe in softball questions first
It
or
depends
the
on who
hard
I'm.
question?
I don't go hard first. Yeah, no, I like to think that like I want to put someone at ease. Not that I'm going to put them at ease and then like attack them,
Right.
because that's not what I'm not there to attack you. Like I'll
Right.
hold you to account, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll call things out the way I call it, but like, I'm not going to welcome. Let's sit, let's talk, and then we'll figure it out. Yeah, but I'm not going to go at you I'm not going to go out 0 to 60 in question 1. Who wants to be
Yeah.
communicated with that like that? Nobody wants to be talked to like that.
Well, then it doesn't
Like
put the
yeah.
guest at ease.
Yeah, like if you started this interview and were like, Yas, what's the worst day you've ever had as a journalist? I'd be like, well, settle down. Let's talk. Let's start easy here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, what was it like interviewing President Biden?
It was an awesome experience. I mean, it was during a crazy time, and we were in COVID times. We were in a COVID era. It was an unprecedented campaign. The president at the time, President Trump, was not able to be on the campaign trail. Then candidate Biden was not able to be on the campaign trail. The only ways in which they were communicating with the audience was through television, was through showing up from their living rooms, basically. They weren't going out to these stumping on, at major campaign rallies. So it felt really, not that it's ever not important, but it felt even more important, especially when people were dying from COVID. It felt like a real responsibility. And I think I got about 13 minutes with him, which was also pretty awesome.
What was he like as a person?
He was, he's the former president now of the United States, former vice president then of the United States. He is, is a very kind, warm, welcoming person. He answered questions that he wanted to answer and danced around questions that he didn't want. And, as any politician would.
Yeah.
But he felt earnest. He seemed very earnest to me.
Before I let you go, you had a health scare.
Yes.
A couple years ago. Can you tell me about that experience?
Yeah. So I had something called myopericarditis. It was the inflammation of the lining of my heart and the inflammation of my heart muscle. And it was developed from a virus called Coxsackie, which is hand, foot, mouth, which a lot of young kids get.
Yeah.
So it was idiopathic, meaning I got it from a virus. And I had a pain in my chest in mid-December, and I work out a lot and stuff. And I was like, I just oftentimes brush things off and keep moving. And I had been working 17 days straight at this point. I had no break. And I just kept going, and we were going to Florida to visit my in-laws for Christmas. And I kept going, and but I was just getting really exhausted, and this pain just persisted. And so there was a couple of days I took off from running, and it started to get better. I started taking aspirin. My dad was a physician, and I always knew if you get a heart attack or have heart issues, just take aspirin. So I was like, let me at least take some baby aspirin or something. And so I started taking aspirin, and I'd stopped working out, and it started to get better. And then I thought, well, I don't want to get an ulcer. So I stopped taking the aspirin. And then it started coming back. And then we went home from Florida. And a couple of days later, I woke up in excruciating pain. And I went to the urgent care. And they told me I had had reflux. And I thought, okay, this doesn't feel like reflux. Maybe you should give me an EKG. And they said, yeah, no, you're fine. You're a young, healthy woman. You're fine. And I said, okay. This was just a couple of years ago. And so then the next day I woke up and I said, I'm having a heart attack. And I called my husband, and he was out. And I said, I got to go to the emergency room. I said, I'm having pain down my left arm. I have extreme pain in my chest. I'm immobilized. I need to go to the emergency room. So he came and picked me up and took me to the emergency room. And I got there, and they said, you have pericarditis. You have inflammation of the lining of your heart. And you have to take high-dose Motrin for a couple of days. You're not going to work out. You'll be fine. But we just got to do an echo and check around your heart and see if you have any fluid. Then they realized I had about 600 cc's of fluid. So my heart was basically being choked. I was,
oh my gosh.
And had I kept going, had I kept going, I could have essentially gone into cardiac arrest. And so they said, we're going to check you into the hospital. And I was out in Long Island at the time. So they checked me into the hospital, and they said, we're going to have to drain the fluid around your heart. and by inserting a needle into that cavity and into the lining and draining the fluid. And so I got in touch at that point with the doctor at NYU, who was the head of cardiac, the cardiac unit, and he said, I think you should come to New York City to do this because God forbid something happens and you need a surgical team on site. That hospital that you're at doesn't have a surgical team. And so they transferred me to NYU, and I stayed there for a few days, and they drained the fluid around my heart. And overnight, I had to sit with a needle that was like surrounding my heart as the fluid drained. So the next morning, there was like a bag of fluid attached to this needle that was attached to essentially the lining of my heart. And I was there for a couple of days, and I started to feel a lot better. And the doctor was like, you're going to have to take colchicine, which is an anti-inflammatory that you take for Crohn's disease, and you're going to have to take Motrin for a few months. You're not going to be able to work out at all. You have to basically the most exercise you have is like walking a dog. And for me, that was going to be brutal. Like I work out every day, and I go pretty hard. And especially with like the stress of this job and stuff, it's kind of what keeps me going. And so I left the hospital. I had probably lost like 15 pounds, which was maybe an upside to the whole thing. I was like,
I love how honest you are with that.
I was like, well, I'm skinny.
Every time I have to have a colonoscopy, because I have to get them every 2 years because I have Lynch syndrome, I'm like, well, at least I'll lose 5 pounds.
Exactly. So I bounced out of there. And a couple of days later, I started to get chills again. And I forgot to mention, like when I was having a lot of inflammation, I was getting these chills, like when you have a fever, but I couldn't stop shaking. And the pain started to come back in my chest and my shoulders. And I called my doctor. They said, we want you to come to the hospital immediately. So I went back to the hospital, and they said, now you have inflammation of your actual heart, and you need to get checked back in. So I went back to the hospital for about 7 more days, and they had to calm that inflammation as well. And then I was able to finally leave. I was out of work for about a month. And then I finally came back to work, and I was unable to exercise for about 6 months. And now I do have kind of what is called chronic pericarditis. So I have something where it rears its ugly head every so often. But I know how to do it now, take care of it now. So every so often I'll just feel a little bit of a tinge, and I'll take Motrin for 3 days, and I won't work out, and it goes away, and I'm back to my regular routine. But otherwise I ran 7 miles this morning. I'm like, totally myself and then some, but it's now just something I deal with, right? Like part of getting older. But it was definitely, there was a moment where I asked my doctor, like, he's like, are you afraid? And I said, yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to die and leave my kids motherless. And he said, let me worry about getting you healthy. You just like rest in your bed. Like you take care of like you and be confident that I'm going to get you out of here and healthy.
Yeah. Going through something as major as that, did that change your perspective at all of your work when you returned?
I mean, the full circle is like, now I'm like only a half yes girl. I still say yes a lot, but I say it less. Yeah. I have perspective. Like I understand what the things that are important and the things that aren't important. And I try and prioritize my family. And some days I do good at that. And some days I'm good at it. And some days I'm not great at it. And I don't say yes as often. And I just recognize that health can be fleeting and life is short. And I try and remind myself of that on the days in which I, think more about the things that don't matter as much.
For sure. Do you have time for quick fires?
Real quick, and then really we got to go. Yeah.
Okay,
go.
Fill in the blank. If I weren't a journalist, I would be
a doctor.
As we just talked about that.
Exactly. But I'd have to get into med school first. So that would be a problem.
Your coffee order.
Decaf oat milk latte.
Your favorite travel destination.
Like that I've been?
Sure.
I mean, anywhere in the Caribbean, but also I love Italy.
Your favorite restaurant?
I love this place called Sweetwater, which is in my neighborhood in Brooklyn. I also love anything sushi anywhere, as long as it's good sushi. I mean, I'm just obsessed.
Me too.
I love Blue Ribbon Sushi here in New York City too.
Something people often get wrong about you.
That I'm not nice.
Journalists always say that.
Like, or that like, yeah, that I'm like, I don't know, that I'm like super confident when I'm not. You know, I think people are always like, "Oh my God, you're like." I've always thought you're like the most confident person. I'm like, yeah, that's just a ploy. I just play it well.
Actually,
TV.
Ginger Z on one of my podcast episodes, Ginger Z said something people often get wrong about her is that she's nice.
That's funny. I am nice.
The last movie, TV show, or book you watched and loved?
The Summer I Turned Pretty. Obsessed. My producer's in the room and she's laughing at me. Did you just hear me say that? I'm obsessed and I'm Team Conrad.
Okay, good. That was the follow-up question from me.
Yeah. And Black Rabbit was great. Black Rabbit. And then also Let Them. I love the Mel Robbins Let Them theory book.
I love that book
too. So good. Yeah.
A snapshot of an ordinary everyday moment that gives you true joy.
Sitting down with my kids and hearing about their day at dinner. We always do like a day. Like, what'd you do today? I love that so much. It's like my best. And then like kissing them goodnight because I love hugging and kissing them. And then I love also going and hanging out by myself or with my husband.
Yeah. It's hard to ask a 3-year-old about their day though.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now I'm like, how's your day? And she's like, can I grab the fork? I'm like, no, I'm asking you, how was your day? What did you do?
Yeah, exactly.
If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
I know you sent me these questions beforehand, so I should have the answers. If I could switch lives with someone for a day, who would it be? I think like Taylor Swift or something. I'd want to see like what is it like to be that person? What is it like to be Taylor? Like what is it like? I don't know. Yeah, maybe.
I
someone.
know, but you couldn't live.
Or
Yeah,
like
be a superstar.
or the Pope, or like the Pope. What does he do? What does he do all day?
Yeah,
You know,
that would be
I'd like
fascinating.
to be the Pope. Like what? I don't know. Yeah, Taylor Swift for the Pope. It's so random.
So random. One thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
My podcast team. And my family. Yeah.
Is your
my
podcast
dog.
team around you right now?
One
saying,
of them is.
Yes.
One of them. She's actually trying to edit the podcast, and the other one's texting me being like, are you almost done? Because we need to do the rest of this podcast.
Okay, last question, I swear.
Okay.
If you could go back in time to when you first started your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
It's going to be okay. And like, just keep going. Just keep going. You're going to be okay.
Could you tell yourself that when you were younger, though? Like,
No.
Would you believe it?
No.
Yeah.
I'd be like, who are you? Who are you from the future? I don't believe you. What's wrong with your hair?
We always tell ourselves like these things we would tell ourselves if we were younger, but would we actually take that
I
into
wouldn't have listened.
consideration?
I'd have been like, you're wrong. You have no idea. You don't know what you're talking about. You're an old lady. Stop.
Yas, this was so fun. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks.
Where can people watch The Scoop, by the way?
So we're on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. Here's a scoop on YouTube. And then wherever you get your podcast every day, we have a release at 5 p.m. Eastern time, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. And so, yeah, you can get it anywhere.
Perfect. And people can watch you from time to time on NBC Nightly News,
NBC
right?
Nightly News, on Today's Show, on NBC News Now, NBC, all over the place. You can listen,
all over the place.
Watch, hear, all of it. And listen to Here's a Scoop. It's such a fun podcast. I love doing it. It's a daily news podcast. It's it's amazing. Like today we're talking about the government shutdown and the possibility of maybe there's some movement. We also talked to Lester Holt, who's got a new podcast out, a crime series out, which is incredible, about this guy who's on death row who could actually be executed in the next couple of weeks. I mean, every day is something different. Yesterday it was about the Israel-Gaza war. And then we also have like kind of really light moments. Today we're wrapping it up with some Aaron Judge and a Bad Bunny moment. So it's a lot of really good stuff. We take people on an emotional ride, but a lot of news, a lot of wrap up. It's really cool. So
government shutdown, Bad Bunny.
Exactly. See, it's like an emotional roller coaster ride. Exactly.